All right, friends. Well, welcome back to session 3 of Training Them Up. Very practical insights from two very imperfect parents. We're really glad that if you're tuning in here to session 3, that means that most likely if you watched the first 2 sessions, and our hope is that in those first 2 conversations, wherever you are in your parenting journey, whether you are soon to be parent, brand new parent, or just looking for some tools along the way, these have been helpful to you, and they've helped maybe also just make you feel seen, that the struggles that you're encountering at home, you are not alone, you are not by yourself, that oftentimes I feel like the things that we've been sharing are things that we're aiming at more than things that we're succeeding at a lot of the time. So again, the metaphor we've been using all along is these 3 lessons, these 3 pieces of practical wisdom that we've been trying to share with you are guideposts. They're things that we're aiming at, acknowledging that oftentimes we fall short of them or we miss the mark on them. But the hope is as we go on, as we get older, we get better and better at arriving at that guidepost and being that type of parent for our kiddos. So in the first 2 sessions, we shared the importance, the 2 of the most influential things that have impacted our parenting so far is the desire to be empathic parents, so meeting our kids where they are. Session 2, we talked about our desire to be empowering parents, so giving them tools, not always quick fixes to the issues and the problems that they're solving. And I truly believe that we have saved the most important for last.
Yes.
I think we've even saved the most important, the most impactful, and 100% the most challenging for last.
And probably the most overlooked, to be honest.
And probably the most overlooked, because what we're going to talk about here in this session is so far what we've talked about is things you can do that focus on your kids.
Right.
This is looking the opposite direction and looking at yourself.
Yeah.
So lesson number 3 that we have for you, the guidepost here, number 3, is the importance of not only, learning about your kids, but it's learning about yourself. And so lesson number 3 is do your own work. Do your own work. This session, we're going to talk about how important it is. And again, that's really a good point, how overlooked it is as to the importance of doing your own work, being aware of yourself, being aware of your insecurities, your baggage, your woundedness, because the less aware we are of ourselves and our own struggles, our own pain, our own, insecurities and such, the more opportunities there are to project them upon our kids. One of my favorite quotes on this, is that, and I got this from my own therapist one time, which is, if you don't transform your pain, you will transmit your pain. If you don't transform your pain, you'll transmit your pain. And I can think of no other people in our lives who are more susceptible to my pain than my kids. I can think of no other people. I mean, maybe our marriage as well, but the people that are the most susceptible to receiving a sort of your pain being transmitted and they become infected with it themselves are our kids. And so it is just, again, probably the most important lesson, the most important guidepost that we've learned so far, that again, we're trying really hard to live into, is to do our own work. Now, there's a whole host of ways in which you can do this. You can find a good therapist or a counselor. You can see a mentor or a pastor. You can buy tons of really good books on this and watch TED Talks and listen to Brene Brown's podcast, which we do. You could do all of those things. I feel like here in 2020, I don't necessarily think that's the biggest hurdle that we're encountering. There's the stigma around mental health and such is still there. It's still there, but it's lessening. Lessening. We here at our church, we're trying really hard to address it in some really public ways so that the stigma as it relates to faith and mental illness becomes eradicated. So I don't necessarily know if that's the biggest hurdle we should spend time with, where to go if you're looking to become self-aware. For us as parents, I feel like the biggest hurdle is not necessarily the means by which to achieve and become more self-aware, but it's the motivation. Mm-hmm. It's the motivation. If you were like us, you can find yourself justifying, well, I don't have time to do that. Like, please tell me, thanks Kyle, like, please tell me where in my schedule I have time to go and work on myself. We say, I don't have time to do it. I don't have the energy to do it. I'm exhausted. By the time I finally have some space to do it, I just want to lay down and not go talk about myself and do more work now on myself. Again, full confession. Another thing I think we do as parents is we justify that we don't need to do our own work because, our kids are not in as bad of a situation as we were growing up. Like, our kids don't have it as bad as we did. Like, I grew up with a temperamental parent or a person suffering from substance abuse or whatever the struggle is for you. I think sometimes we can justify and say, well, I was in that environment and I turned out fine. Or, that kid over there is living in that family they have it way worse off than us. Again, full confession, I think we do this. If even if we don't speak it, we think it sometimes in our subconscious. We justify the lack of motivation to work on ourselves because we love to compare. We compare ourselves to how our parents did and say, oh, well, our kids don't have it as bad as we did. Or our kids don't have it as bad as that family over there. Mm-hmm. And to that, I would just say a couple of things. Especially if you're someone who, like us, you can look at your own experience and go, well, at least we're not giving our kids the same treatment that we got as parents, and I turned out fine. The first thing I would say to that is maybe you're not fine, right? Maybe you and I are not fine, and is fine the measure of success? Is fine what we're willing to sit with and settle with and accept? Yeah. That's the first thing I would say. And the second thing I would say is, let's say you are fine. Let's say you did climb out of a really, really traumatic and toxic upbringing in your family, and you did turn out, quote unquote, fine. There is no guarantee that your kids will turn out the same way. Your kids are entirely different people than you. Mm-hmm. They're wired maybe somewhat similar to you, but they're they are independent of you. They are different people. There is no guarantee that them being exposed to the same thing you were, they will turn out the same way you did. They may not have the tools. They may not have the ability. They may just not have the personality to overcome those struggles the way that you did, or the way that kid over there did in that family, sort of thing. And so, again, friends, I think what I'm trying to really drive home is, I think one of the motivations, or one of the biggest obstacles, is motivation. When it comes to doing our own work, we don't have the motivation, or we love to compare ourselves to other people. And this is where, I'll put on my, I'll do my pastor thing. I'll remind you that, especially if you're a person of faith, you're a person of Christian faith. I love the passage in Luke 12, whereby Jesus says, "To whom much is given, much will be required." To whom much is given, much will be required. And I love so much. What I love so much about that passage is it's similar to what Jesus says in another place when he talks about judging other people. He says, you're going to be judged based off of how you judged other people. And so what I love what Jesus is doing there is he's saying, if you place that over top of this conversation on parenting, what he's saying is, please, for the love of goodness sakes, please, don't think that I'm going to judge you. I'm not, when we pass from this life to the next, Jesus is not going to go, well, let's put you next to someone else and see how you fared and see how you compared. I think what Jesus is going to do is Jesus is going to hold me accountable to the parent I could have become, the person I was supposed to become, one who did not live sort of captive to my own insecurities and pain, but became aware of them, worked to transcend them, so that, again, I don't transmit those things to my kids, that I don't inadvertently do so with my kids. And I guess, I think this is one of the reasons why this had to be one of the lessons that we shared, mm-hmm. is because it is absolutely one of the most overlooked lessons in parenting, the importance of spending time on yourself and working on yourself. And just, it's not only overlooked, but these are things that we give to our kids that we're not even aware of most of the time. Yeah. These are the things that we give to our kids. So there are things that we're consciously, you're probably listening to this and you've got a bunch of things that you're like, I want to make sure my kids are A, B, and C. I want my kids to be generous. I want my kids to be thoughtful. I want whatever those things are for you. There's things that we consciously want our kids to become. And there's a better chance that they're going to become those things because we're conscious about them. We're intentionally trying to cultivate an atmosphere whereby they are becoming those types of people. Right. But there's a whole bunch of things that we are subconsciously communicating to our kids. And so the only remedy to that is self-awareness. Well, that's the first step. You got to become more self-aware. We got to do our own work, become more aware of our own failures, our own insecurities, our fears, because if we're not careful, we'll parent out of them. We won't parent according to what our kids need in this moment. We just won't even be aware of it, but we'll be parenting out of our own fear, insecurity, or whatever it is that we've been held captive by our entire lives. And again, just to reiterate, we'll do it and we won't even know we're doing it until it's too late. We say, my little joke all the time is, I don't necessarily, I'm not so naive to believe that my kids won't need, to see a therapist or do their own, mental health work someday. I just don't want to be the sole reason why, right? Okay, I'm not going to eliminate.
We don't want to be why.
I'm not going to eliminate the possibility that I know that it's going to be it's totally unrealistic for me to protect my kids from all of my insecurities, all of my baggage. I just don't want to be the sole reason, right? I want to not eliminate, but reduce the amount of stuff that I'm transmitting to them when it comes to my own baggage and emotional woundedness, etc. So lesson number 3, do your own work. And the tips that we have for you are these. So again, not an exhaustive list, just something to get you started. Something to get you started to say, Kyle, that's great. Okay, maybe you in this moment, you're like, okay, I do have the motivation. Tell me where to start. Tell me what to do. How do I begin this process of doing my own work and becoming more self-aware? So the first one I have for you is this. A really, really good starting point in doing your own work is identify your biggest fear and consider where maybe it might be influencing your parenting. Okay? Start there. So you don't have to conquer every bit of it in the first day. Just start with what is your biggest fear as a person and consider where that might be impacting your parenting. So maybe for you, that your biggest fear is closely connected to a really traumatic experience that you encountered in life, or an experience of rejection that you went through as a teenager, or from your parents or from a sibling. I don't know what that is for you, but do the work of trying to figure out. So number 1, what is your biggest fear? Can you be honest about it, honest enough about it? And then can you do the second step of where would it be impacting? And maybe that's hard for you because you just can't disassociate yourself from it. Like it's too personal, it's too scary. So role play with yourself and go, okay, if I was talking to someone who had this fear that I have, where would I be able to diagnose where it impacts their parenting? I feel like we're really, at least me, I feel like sometimes it's so much easier to point out where and how people's fears are impacting them. The moment it's on me, I'm less able to do so. But when it's someone else, I feel like it's so much easier to diagnose someone else's struggles. Maybe you found that to be true. It's so much easier to diagnose someone else's struggles than your own. So play that own mind trick on yourself. Say, if I was talking to someone who had this fear or had this insecurity, where could I see it impacting their parenting? Write it all down and then go, oh, good gracious. Okay, so these could be true of me too.
Yeah.
They could be true of me too.
What is one of your biggest fears?
My biggest fear is, so those of you who are tuned into the Enneagram.
There you go.
So I'm a 3 on the Enneagram, and so the 3s out there, solidarity. The 3s out there, my biggest fear is failure. So I don't want to come across like I don't know what I'm doing. I'd hate coming across like I don't have the answers and the solutions to the problems. And so we've talked a lot about this in the first 2 sessions. And so if I'm not careful, I can parent out of that fear of failure and totally fail in those first 2 sessions, being an empathic parent, being an empowering parent. Since I like being the achiever, the succeeder, the performer, I can jump right into problem-solving mode, and because that's my fear. I'm afraid of failure, and so I can be doing those things, offering all those things, and fail at being what my kids need for me to be in that moment. Which again, and we talk about this in marriage. This is a battle that we have. That's a battle I have when it comes to being a good husband as well. That I am the fixer. I love to fix stuff. And 99% of the time when you have something that you're struggling with, she has very little interest in my solutions, or not immediately.
Yeah.
I need to be empathized. You need to be empathized with first.
Like we talked about.
Yeah.
Connect with me first. And then
Right.
Yeah. Mine would be, so I'm a 6 on the Enneagram. And we have a lot of anxiety. I am afraid of, my biggest fear is something happening to my kids that I feel like I have control over. And so I would say I default to being a hovering parent at every single turn. Like we're walking down the street on the sidewalk and I'm just picturing my kids falling and skinning their knees or running out into the street into a car. Like, and it makes me not, I don't empower them. That's where I really struggle. I can't empower them because I don't want anything to happen to them. And that's where I really have to work.
It's running the risk. Like to empower them is to run the risk. They may fail and they may skin their knee.
Yeah.
And you're like, I could have stopped that.
I know. And I don't want them to hurt. And yeah.
So those are just some examples from us. These are where we don't always succeed living into this. But that's our biggest, those are a couple of our biggest fears. And so I would encourage you to consider, what is yours? What is, like, at the very core, what is your biggest fear? Because it's not if it's impacting your parenting, it's a matter of where and how. And the goal, I think one of the greatest gifts we can give our kids is, can I become more aware of all those instances where my biggest fears are negatively impacting my ability to be a healthy, faithful parent? And can I control them a little bit? I won't be able to completely eliminate them because this is who I am and this is who you are. But I can get better at not allowing them to hold me captive and have power over me, and thus have power over my kids. Right. Second tip for this. So again, we're talking about doing your own work. A second tip that will help you do this is have some means of accountability. Ask for accountability. Now, this is where it's kind of to each their own. So your spouse can be your accountability partner here. And maybe that's the dynamic y'all have and that works for you. That you can say to me, hey, Kyle, this is my biggest fear. This is my woundedness. This is my insecurity. I don't want to parent out of it. So Kyle, can you ask me or can you hold me accountable when I'm parenting out of that? Or vice versa. I can say the same thing to her. That does not work for us because maybe at this part our own maturation, our own, as people and as parents, oftentimes when we're each other's accountability partners, it can kind of feel like policing, and it can it stokes more insecurity. It stokes more unhealthy fighting on behalf of both of us. Like, hey, I know you said you didn't want to be a hovering helicopter parent, but you were. That can be hard.
It's more like judgment than
and it can feel like judgment, and like and again, it can also feel like competition. It can feel like, and so again, you may not have that struggle. That may not be your deal. So you guys might be able to be your accountability partners. For us, we ask our alternative accountability partners to be that for us. And so checking in weekly or making it so part of what I do is there's an app called Habit Tracker. It's free, and you can put kind of what things you want to be held accountable for, and you can ask a friend or someone in your Bible study or small group to check in on you. And that's what we do. That's what we do. And one of the things on there is I want to be held accountable of, am I parenting out of anger sometimes? Am I letting anger get the best of me? I want someone regularly asking me that question, because I have found, not to be legalistic about it, not because like, oh, sweet, it's about, did I do it or not do it? Did I check that box that day? But I have found that when someone is routinely asking me about it and checking in on me about it, and this person loves me and cares about me, I've found that it gives me more power over it. Which I think is true over a lot of things in life, not just parenting. So ask for accountability. That's a hard one. Whew. It's vulnerable. It's not fun, but ask for accountability. The third one, third one is equally not as fun. The third one is equally as uncomfortable, which is another tip, another thing that you can kind of just sit with maybe. This is not necessarily something to do, but it's something to sit with. What we have found to be true is that a part of doing your own work is realizing that your default as parents is going to be, you're going to parent the way your parents did, or you're going to parent the exact opposite of how they parented. So that's your default. That's your default. What we have found to be true is that our default is we either do things just like our parents did, or we did not like that. We very much did not enjoy that. And so we parent in the exact opposite way of how our mom or our dad did it.
Yeah.
And most of the time, neither of those extremes are helpful. Neither of those extremes are healthy. Now, sure, are there some things that your parents did that you want to do, you want to imitate because they were healthy? Yeah, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the things that you didn't like about what your parents did. If you're not aware, you'll do it just like they did it. Or you'll be hyper aware and you'll overcorrect. And so let's say your parents were really hyper controlling and they always made a bunch of rules and they were really, really strict. What we have found is that if we're not conscious about it, if we're not working, we're not doing our own work, we'll either parent the same exact way and inflict the same harm upon our kids, or we'll become hyper aware, we'll overcorrect, and we'll be way too hands off. And our kids need more structure from us. They need more guidance from us. They need more, leadership from us. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like, I don't know, those are a couple of the ways in which I feel like you kind of got a little bit of my own struggle in there as well. Sometimes we can do exactly the same thing, reenact the same exact problems our parents did, or overcorrect on them.
Yeah.
So final one is this. Final tip we have for you. And this maybe is a really good tip, not just for this session, but it's a good tip to kind of like sort of land with all of these sessions, which is maybe the biggest piece of advice is to talk to older parents, talk to wiser parents. I think one of the things that I'm really, really passionate about is one of the things that we've lost in this day and age, we've lost in today's society and culture, is the value of mentorship. That's not a value, certainly that Americans ascribe to very much. Maybe you do, but I feel like on the whole, we don't do that very well. We don't champion and value mentorship. It's all about, I got to be a good parent. I got to be a good CEO. I got to be it overnight, early, by myself, self-sufficient. I don't need none of y'all. And that's just not the way life works. It's certainly not the way I think parenting was meant to work. I think the best parents out there sought counsel. They sought wisdom. When I do premarital counseling, by the way, for my couples, part of the homework, and I give them homework every single session, part of the homework I give them is to go and find an older couple that you admire their marriage, you respect their marriage, take them out to dinner, pay for their dinner, and ask them a ton of questions about what they're doing to foster a healthy marriage. Write them down and try your best to replicate them in your own marriage. I feel like the same is true of parenting.
Oh, yeah.
Same is true of parenting.
Yeah.
And if you're sitting there and you're like, well, I don't want to inconvenience anybody, which I feel like sometimes that's our struggle. Like, we don't want to inconvenience someone. We don't want to put them out. I think like we had this conversation recently. If we're 50, 60 years old and a younger couple of parents or a single parent came to us and said, hey, we really admire your parenting. We really look up to the ways in which you've raised your kids. We want to imitate some of those things in our own life. That would not be an inconvenience. Like, we would be thrilled by that. We would be so jazzed to be like, and feel honored by that.
Yeah.
And so if maybe you've got someone in your life right now, you've got a parent, and maybe it's your parents, I would encourage you, you've probably got you're probably, pretty familiar with your parents. Maybe find someone else. If you've got someone like that in your life, but you're scared to ask them because you don't want to inconvenience them, I don't know. Maybe this is just us projecting upon other people, but I would just feel so honored if someone came to me and said, we look up to you. And so there's a high probability that they're going to feel the same way. And they've been around the block a time, 2, 5, 10 times, 15 times. Yeah. And I feel like that is the greatest gift that, especially as a pastor, the church provides, that we're trying to do faith as a village, not as a bunch of individuals, but as a village. Many of us love that phrase, that parenting your kids, raising kids is done in a village. We say that, and sometimes we don't really necessarily follow through with it. And it can be one of the most impactful things that we do in parenting, which is we seek out the advice of people who know what it's like to raise a teenager, who knows what it's like to ride the mood swings of a preteen, or knows what it's like to kind of shepherd and coach your kid who's gone off to college and you're not there all the time. So how do you, what is helicopter parenting and what is supporting them? What is that balance? Maybe that's something that someone who's been there a time or two can give you some piece of advice on. And so talking to older parents, talking to wiser parents, is probably one of the biggest difference makers, not just as it relates to this session, but all the sessions that we've shared so far. And so on behalf of both Marie and I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for tuning into these sessions and tuning into this conversation. Again, this was not an exhaustive conversation. In many ways, this was just a conversation starter. So if you're a new parent or someone who's just searching some tools, I hope this was helpful to you. I hope this kind of gets some conversation started with your spouse, your partner, or with your kids. And that this aids you and moves you along. And who knows, we might come back and do something like this again in the future with some more things that we've learned, some other pieces of advice and wisdom that we've gleaned along the way. And feel free to share those, right? Feel free to, we'd love your feedback.
Yes.
We'd love to know kind of how this course was for you. Did it meet needs? Did it not? Are there other needs that you're struggling with as parents? You can send those questions, you can send those feedback to communications@pqmc.org. One more time, communications@pqmc.org. Provide those, and we'll look forward to incorporating those in some future sessions. But parents, know that we are in your corner.
Yeah.
We are, we are with you.
Learning, constantly learning.
That's right.
Failing, constantly
That's
failing.
right. That's right. We're on this journey with you. And so go ahead and head over now, one more time, to the application guide. We've got some resources and notes there for you and some discussion questions there for you. And know that we are praying for you as you seek to go about this work, as we all seek to go about this work of training up our kids in the ways in which they ought to go.